It always began on the evening of Boxing Day, around 8 o'clock. The last of the relatives, that one stubborn aunt who always outstayed her welcome, has finally been bundled into a taxi, leaving behind nothing but a faint, sweet scent of sherry and a rogue mince pie crumb on the carpet. The house, for the first time in 48 hours, falls into a strange, muffled silence. This was a space that just hours before had been a whirlwind of high-decibel chaos. The sound of ripping paper, the Queen's speech, the collective groan at a terrible cracker joke, the annual family argument over The Great Escape versus The Sound of Music, the roar of laughter from the Morecambe and Wise special. Now, there is only the quiet, electric hum of the refrigerator and the distant, tinny sound of the television, which has been left on, but which nobody is really watching. You look around the living room. It's a festive battlefield, a casualty zone of celebration. A mountain of scrunched-up wrapping paper sits waiting in a black bin bag by the door. Redundant, ripped paper hats lie crushed on the sofa cushions. The magnificent Christmas tree, which seemed so impossibly magical just yesterday morning, now looks, well, just a bit tired, a bit done. The tinsel seems to have lost its sparkle. The adrenaline is gone. The glorious, sugar-fueled, chaotic climax of Christmas Day is over. And in its place, a new feeling creeps in. A strange, listless, heavy sensation. A feeling of profound nothingness. Welcome to the Twixmas Slump. Ah, yes. That forgotten, formless void between the 26th of December and the 1st of January. That strange, unmarked territory on the calendar where time itself seemed to dissolve, stretching and pulling like warm toffee. We call it Twixmas now, but in the 1980s, it didn't really have a name. It was just the week after. A beige-coloured limbo land, fueled entirely by leftovers, chocolate oranges, and television repeats. In the 1980s, this wasn't just a holiday period. Oh no, it was a collective post-indulgence coma. And for the kids of the 80s, with no internet to scroll, no streaming services to binge, and no digital world to escape into, this week was something else entirely. It was an endurance test, a marathon of patience, punctuated by moments of culinary desperation and profound, earth-shattering boredom. It was a test of survival, and it all began not with a bang, but with a quiet, collective sigh and the slow, ceremonial creak of the fridge door opening on the morning of December 27th. The morning of December 27th. The house is still. You wake up late, around 10, which feels scandalous. You wander downstairs, not entirely sure what day of the week it is. It could be Tuesday, it could be Saturday, it simply is.
The normal rules of life are suspended. Breakfast, for instance, is no longer a civilized affair involving toast or cereal. Breakfast is now a random handful of Quality Street from the giant tin on the coffee table. And this brings us to the first great investigation of the Twixmas period, the politics of the chocolate tin. You see, the hierarchy of the tin had already been firmly established on Christmas Day. By the 27th, we were living in the aftermath. You'd lift that heavy embossed lid, the whoosh of escaping air, the sweet plasticky smell, and you'd be confronted by a landscape of rejection. All the A-list celebrities were gone. The purple one, with its hazelnut and caramel, vanished. The green triangle, a distant memory. The little orange cremes, wrapped in their crackly foil, eaten by Nan because she was the only one who liked them. What remained was the B-list, the understudies, a sea of those hard toffee pennies that threatened to pull your fillings out. the strawberry creme, which was always just a bit too sweet, and the ultimate symbol of Twixmas desperation, the coconut eclair. That sad blue wrappered sweet that nobody ever actively chose. It was the culinary equivalent of the last kid picked for the football team. And yet, you'd eat it. You'd eat it because it was there, and because opening an actual bar of chocolate felt like too much effort. But the chocolate tin was merely the opening act. The main event, the true centerpiece of the slump, was the refrigerator itself. Opening the fridge door on December 27th was not a casual glance for milk. It was a full-blown archaeological expedition. You'd pull the heavy door open, and a blast of cold, condensed air would hit you in the face, carrying a complex bouquet of aromas. Cold gravy, citrus, brandy butter, and, is that cooked cabbage? The inside was a masterpiece of Tetris-like storage, a chaotic, silver-foiled landscape of leftovers. There, on the top shelf, was the trifle, now half-excavated, looking like a geological cross-section of custard, jelly, and rapidly deflating cream. Beside it, a small, suspicious-looking bowl of bread sauce, which had now solidified into a single, pale, glutinous mass. There was the cheese board, now just a few sad, dried-out scraps of cheddar, and a very lonely-looking wedge of Stilton, sweating slightly, in its plastic wrap. And then there was the bird.
The remains of the turkey. It sat in the center of the fridge, a vast skeletal carcass draped in foil, like a Roman ruin. It loomed over everything, a silent, edible monument to the feast that had passed. It was no longer a symbol of celebration. It was a challenge, a responsibility, a problem to be solved. For the first 24 hours, this was a golden age, the honeymoon period of the leftover. Nothing in this world tastes as good as that first cold turkey sandwich on the evening of Boxing Day. Sliced white bread, a slathering of real butter, thick cut meat, none of that processed rubbish, a layer of stuffing and a generous dollop of cranberry sauce. It was, and remains, a sandwich of the gods. The morning of the 27th brought its own masterpiece, Bubble and Squeak, a glorious, greasy, sizzling fry-up of leftover potatoes, sprouts, carrots and parsnips, all mashed together and fried until crispy. It was the ultimate comfort food, a warm, savoury hug on a grey morning. But the honeymoon was brief. By the evening of the 27th, you're having cold turkey, this time with leftover roast potatoes, which never reheat properly, and a boat of gravy that's been microwaved into submission. It's fine. It's food. By the 28th, the mood has shifted. The turkey is still there. It's still taking up half the fridge. The family looks at it, and the turkey looks back. Its optimism now replaced with a sense of quiet judgment. Mum, ever the pragmatist, now enters phase 2 of the operation. You start seeing turkey in places it was never meant to be. Turkey vol au vent, a turkey salad bulked out with a tin of sweet corn. And then, on the 29th, it happens. The inevitable. The final act. You walk into the kitchen and you smell something that is both familiar and deeply, deeply wrong. A warm, dusty, slightly sweet smell that does not belong in a British kitchen in December. It's the smell of Vesta curry powder. Mum has done it. She has declared the official spicy death of the festive bird. She has made the turkey curry. It was a culinary inevitability, a dish born not of inspiration, but of sheer pragmatic desperation. Great dry chunks of leftover breast meat suspended in a luminous yellow-brown sauce, bulked out with any remaining sprouts, perhaps a few lonely carrots, and maybe even a stray roast potato, all diced into anonymity.
It was edible, sometimes it was even quite nice, but more than that, it was a ritual. It was the final spicy funeral procession for the Christmas feast. It was the closing of a chapter. With the curry eaten and the carcass finally boiled down for a soup that would be frozen and forgotten about until March, the fridge was finally, mercifully, empty. The culinary part of the slump was over. Now you had to face the real challenge, the terrifying flickering void of the television. This was the great crisis point of the Twixmas week, usually around December 29th. The food was no longer a novelty, and the television had shown you everything it had to offer. All that was left was time. Great, vast, empty stretches of it. And this was when you had to confront your Christmas presents. The new toys, which had seemed like the center of the universe on Christmas morning, now presented a terrible problem. The batteries not included crisis had inevitably struck. That magnificent Casio keyboard, which you'd used to play the demo tune of Jingle Bells 500 times, was now silent. That radio-controlled car, which had looked so sleek and fast on the box, had jammed its wheel on a stray piece of tinsel within an hour and now sat gathering dust under the sofa. You'd read your Beano or Dandy annual from cover to cover, completed all the puzzles, and even read the copyright page. You'd built the Lego set, or more accurately, you'd built the main bit, got frustrated with the smaller fiddly pieces, and abandoned it in favor of building a spaceship of your own design, which was really just a multicolored block. This was the 1980s. There was no internet to scroll, no YouTube to fall into, no video game to download. There was just you, your fading toys, and the four walls of the living room. This was the great Christmas boredom. It was a boredom so profound, so heavy, you could almost see it, like dust motes hanging in the weak winter sunlight. It forced you to be creative in the most reluctant way possible. You'd find yourself doing things you would never normally do. You'd read the back of the cereal box meticulously. You'd investigate the baffling tiny plastic prizes that came out of the crackers, trying to figure out the trick to the little magic cup and ball game. You'd pester your siblings, which would inevitably lead to a brief, sluggish fight that neither of you had the energy to truly commit to. And then, just as the boredom reached its absolute peak, just as you felt you might actually dissolve into the sofa cushions, one of your parents, usually Mum, would stand up and say the most dreaded words of the entire week. Right, we're all going out for a walk to get some fresh air. Oh, the horror. The sheer existential dread of the forced family walk.
It was a non-negotiable ritual. An attempt to blow away the cobwebs and pretend that you hadn't all been living like hibernating animals for 3 days. The preparation was an ordeal in itself. 10 minutes of frantic searching for your good shoes, a mismatched glove, and that itchy woolen hat your nan knitted you. You'd be bundled into your warmest coat, wrapped in a scarf until only your eyes were visible, and marched out of the warm, cosy house into the damp, grey, unforgiving afternoon. The walk was always the same. A grim-faced procession to the local park. The sky was the colour of concrete. The ground was sodden and muddy. The grass slick with a faint, greasy frost. You'd kick a wet leaf. You'd complain that you were cold. Dad would point at a robin and say, "Look," with a level of enthusiasm that felt completely forced. You'd walk once around the deserted playground, stare at the damp, sad-looking swings, and then, after an amount of time that felt both like an eternity and also not long enough to justify the effort, the family would collectively, silently agree that this was a terrible idea. The walk back was always faster. You'd tumble back into the house, shedding coats and muddy boots, bringing the smell of cold, wet air with you. The house, by contrast, felt like a tropical paradise. The warmth of the central heating, the soft glow of the tree lights. It was bliss. The walk, as miserable as it was, had served its purpose. It had killed an hour. But more importantly, it had reminded you that the sofa was in fact the greatest invention in human history. You would settle back into your spot, victorious. You had faced the outside world and returned. A weary traveller, you had earned the right to do absolutely nothing again. You would pick up the Radio Times, not to find something to watch, but just to have something to read. And as you flicked through the pages, past the snooker and the black and white films, you'd finally see it. A change on the horizon, a flicker of something new. The listings for December 31st, New Year's Eve. The slump was breaking, the void was coming to an end. The world, slowly, sluggishly, was beginning to turn again. It was a subtle shift at first, just a change in the air.
The 30th of December would arrive and suddenly there was a purpose. Mum would announce she was popping to the shops, not for more turkey, but for different food. Strange, exotic things like sausage rolls, cheddar biscuits and perhaps a bottle of shandy for the kids. The topic of conversation around the house, which for days had been limited to what's on telly or are there any of the purple ones left, now turned to one single momentous question. What are we doing for New Year's? This was it, the threshold, the slow groaning rumble as the great engine of the world prepared to start up again. The television schedule suddenly looked exciting. The R for repeat was replaced by new. The Top of the Pops New Year Eve special was being advertised. A glorious, glittery 2-hour marathon of all the songs you'd taped off the radio that year. This was appointment viewing. This mattered. And of course, there was the promise of staying up until midnight. This was the true prize. For one night only, the parental law of bed at 9 was suspended. You were allowed to enter the adult world, a world that seemed to be fueled by peanuts in a glass bowl, little pickled onions on cocktail sticks, and Dad having a small glass of whiskey. As the 31st unfolded, the house had a new energy. The Twixmas gloom was lifting. The leftover curry was a distant memory. The house was being tidied. A fresh set of party food was being laid out on the dining table, and the sense of anticipation was back. You'd sit there, cross-legged in front of the telly, watching the pop charts countdown. The hours would tick by. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You'd feel a wave of sleepiness, the slump trying to pull you back under, but you'd fight it. You had to make it to midnight. And then, just before the bells, the TV would cut to a very serious-looking newsreader, or perhaps a Scottish comedian, standing in front of a clock. The nation would hold its breath. 10, 9, 8. You'd link arms with your family, the same family you'd been silently bored with for a week. 3, 2, 1. The screen would explode. Happy New Year! Big Ben would chime. People you'd never seen before would be cheering and singing on the television. Your parents would kiss. You'd be given a tiny sip of shandy that would fizz on your tongue. The Twixmas Slump was officially over. It had been broken by the sheer, arbitrary force of the calendar. The next day, January 1st, felt different. It was still a holiday, but it was a serious holiday, a clean slate holiday. The decorations suddenly looked wrong, like party guests who had stayed too long. You knew that within a day or two, they would be coming down, packed away in their dusty boxes.
Looking back now from our world of instant distraction where no one is ever truly bored, that Twixmas week seems almost alien. A strange analog pause button that the entire country pressed at the same time. It was never exciting, it was never glamorous, it was, if we're honest, mind-numbingly dull. But there was a strange, forgotten magic in that shared boredom. It was the collective, slightly bloated come-down from the biggest party of the year. It was the sound of a nation quietly digesting, resting, and resetting. It was the gift of true, uninterrupted, absolute nothingness. And as we navigate our noisy, hyper-connected modern lives, perhaps that's the one part of an 80s Christmas we miss the most. Not the toys, not even the food, but that one long, lazy, leftover-filled week where all you had to do was just be. But of course, that's just my memory of that strange, forgotten week. We all have our own Twixmas traditions, our own ways we survived that beige-coloured void. And as always, I would absolutely love to hear yours. What was the one undeniable leftover creation that defined the slump in your house? Was it the classic turkey curry? Or did your family have some other secret culinary masterpiece or disaster? What was your ultimate Twixmas comfort watch? Were you glued to World's Strongest Man? Or was it a specific film that just wasn't Christmas without? And perhaps the most important question of all, am I being unfair to the coconut eclair? Let me know all about it down in the comments section. I read every single one, and honestly, sharing these memories together is the very best part of this channel. If this little journey back to the land of leftovers and lazy afternoons brought a smile to your face, please do consider giving this video a thumbs up and perhaps share it with a friend or family member who might remember the unique, profound boredom of an 80s Twixmas. And of course, if you haven't already, and you've made it this far, so thank you, please do subscribe to the Nostalgia Brit and make sure to click that little notification bell. It just means you'll never miss our next journey into the past. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, stay nostalgic.